Imagine a high-speed train, right?
Huh.
It is hurtling towards a cliff, but instead of, hitting the brakes, the conductors are in a literal fist fight over who actually owns the train.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That absolute nightmare scenario is exactly what is happening to Nigeria's African Democratic Congress right now, the ADC.
I mean, that is a brilliant way to frame it. The prize is sitting right there.
Yeah.
Which in this case is a ready-made political vehicle for the 2027 elections.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the infighting is just so severe that the vehicle itself might just be legally dismantled before anyone even gets to turn the key.
Exactly. And for anyone listening to this deep dive who follows or has a stake in Nigerian politics, I want to make something crystal clear right up front.
Right, the disclaimer.
Yes, the disclaimer. Because we are dealing with highly charged left-wing, right-wing, and center coalition factionalism here. And we are not taking any sides.
Not at all.
Our mission today is purely forensic. We are looking at a comprehensive editorial report and broadcast guide. It's dated April 18th, 2026.
Which is incredibly recent.
Super recent. And it compiles highly detailed, substantially similar accounts from major outlets. We're talking Daily Trust, PM News, Tribune, Blueprint, Sahara Reporters, Lagos Post, The Eagle Online, and Vanguard.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. We're just impartially reporting the claims and the legal maneuvers in these sources, just mapping out the battlefield based on the latest reporting. So you can see exactly how this operates under the hood without us endorsing any specific viewpoint.
Which is, frankly, a necessary approach because the battlefield we are mapping is incredibly dense. I mean, we are dealing with multiple court injunctions, rebellious conventions, and some of the heaviest hitters in Nigerian politics all colliding at exactly the same time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because how does a political party actually go about tearing itself apart in broad daylight? I mean, what is the inciting incident here?
Well, the reports point to mid-April as the moment this went from backroom tension to a massive public explosion. We really have to focus on April 14th, 2026.
Okay, what happened on the 14th?
That is the day a faction of the ADC, led by David Mark, decided to hold this massive national convention. It was at the Rainbow Event Center in Abuja.
Right.
And they didn't just, gather to give speeches or whatever. They took a highly explosive vote to officially expel their rival leaders from the party entirely.
Wow, just kicking them out.
Exactly. Specifically, they targeted Nafiu Bala and Leke Abejide.
Wait, they expelled Leke Abejide.
Yeah.
But based on the sources, isn't he one of the people who actually, built the ADC into a functioning political force?
That is exactly his argument. I mean, that's the core of his defense. He is a sitting member of the House of Representatives for the Yagba federal constituency in Kogi State.
Right.
And just 3 days after this convention, so on April 18, she and Bala launched this massive counteroffensive. They held what they called a World Press Conference in Abuja to basically say the convention was an unlawful assembly, a total nullity.
I bet Abejide didn't mince words.
He really didn't. He pointed out that he personally nurtured the ADC into relevance. He explicitly cited the fact that he secured 2 House of Representatives seats for the party in the 2023 general elections.
So he's basically saying, I brought actual electoral value to this organization. I literally have the receipts, and now you're trying to kick me out.
Yeah, and he took it a step further. He called the convention treasonable. He branded the Mark-led faction as opportunists, hijackers.
Hijackers. Wow.
Yeah. He really dug into their political histories, accusing this specific coalition of recruiting politicians who are, serial defectors.
Right, people who just jump ship.
Exactly. Abejide's argument is that these aren't dedicated progressives building a party. He says these are the exact same figures who previously orchestrated the fall of the PDP.
Oh, wow.
He is painting them as like a virus that jumps from host to host, destabilizing everything they touch, which explains why Abejide completely laughed off his own expulsion.
Right, because if I'm understanding his stance correctly, he's arguing that a legal structure that doesn't legitimately exist cannot validly discipline anyone.
Precisely.
It's like getting fired from your job by a group of random people who just walked in off the street. You just look at them and say, you can't fire me, you don't even work here.
That is a perfect analogy.
But wait, I have to push back here because the logic doesn't fully track for me. The Rainbow Event Center in Abuja is a major venue.
It is.
Renting it out, organizing a national convention, getting delegates there, that takes serious coordination. And funding. The David Mark faction must be basing their authority on something tangible, right? That they can't just be operating on thin air.
Yeah.
So what is their actual claim to legitimacy here?
What's fascinating here is that they are operating with absolute confidence, and they base that confidence on a few specific pillars of defense. First, argue they're in strict compliance with the party's own constitution.
Okay.
Second, they point out that they formally notified INEC, that's the Independent National Electoral Commission.
Right. They let them know about the event.
Yes, fulfilling the administrative protocol.
Even though the reports note that INC explicitly declined to actually show up and monitor the convention.
Right, because of existing court orders, INEC stayed away.
Yeah.
But the Mark faction says, hey, we did our part, we sent the invite.
Interesting.
But it's their third pillar that is the true engine of their strategy. They are relying heavily on a very specific mechanism within the law. Section 83, subsection 5 of the Electoral Act, 2026.
Okay, Section 83.5. I saw this in the sources. What exactly is this, and how does it actually work in practice?
So, on paper, the underlying logic makes sense. It was designed to protect political parties from judicial micromanagement.
Like courts getting too involved.
Exactly. Historically, you would have scenarios where someone lost a local primary election, ran to a judge complaining about seating arrangements or, minor procedural slights, and a single judge could just halt an entire national campaign. So legislation like this is intended to act as a shield, ensuring that internal party business like holding conventions or disciplining members remains out of the courts.
Ah, I see. So the Mark faction is weaponizing that shield. They are essentially performing a hostile takeover and then throwing up Section 83.5 to say, hey, federal law says judges aren't allowed to tell us how to run our own club.
That is the exact strategy. But obviously, the Bala and Abejide faction isn't just going to sit back and accept that interpretation.
No, of course not.
If you can't defeat a faction inside the party apparatus, you force them into the federal courts, which has led to an absolute maze of legal roadblocks.
Yeah, let's try to map that legal traffic jam, because reading through these sources, I'm genuinely losing track of the gavels here. We have multiple courts issuing orders at the exact same time.
It really requires a bit of forensic timeline building. Let's start on March 12, 2026.
Okay, March 12.
The Court of Appeal in Abuja delivers a major judgment. They dismiss an appeal by Mark's faction and explicitly direct all parties to maintain the status quo ante bellum.
Which means?
That means freeze the board. Keep the party leadership exactly as it was before the original September 2, 2025 lawsuit was filed.
Hold on, let me jump in right there. If the Court of Appeal, which is a very high court, orders everyone to freeze the board in March, how on earth did Mark's faction rent a convention center and hold an explosive vote to expel their rivals a month later? Why weren't they immediately arrested for contempt of court?
Because that goes right back to the loophole they believe Section 83.5 provides. They're gambling that the internal operations of the party supersede that status quo order.
Wow, just ignoring it.
Pretty much. But the judicial chaos deepens significantly on April 14, the actual day of their convention. While the Mark faction is voting, a completely separate federal judge, Justice Joyce Abdulmalik of the Federal High Court, issues her own order.
A second order?
Yes. This one was triggered by a suit filed by a group including Don Norman Obinna, Johnny Tovi Derrick, and Oba Hijater. They were suing on behalf of all ADC state chairmen.
And what was her ruling?
Once again, direct all parties to maintain the status quo.
Okay, so we have two conflicting stop signs at the same intersection. We have the Court of Appeal saying freeze. We have a federal high court saying freeze.
And simultaneously, according to the reports, we have a third judge.
Wait, really?
Yes, federal high court Justice Emeka White. He takes the main suit from Bala's faction and just adjourns it indefinitely.
Indefinitely. Why would he just pause the whole game?
Justice might pause the game because he knows a tsunami is coming from a higher authority. He is waiting on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court scheduled an accelerated hearing for April 22 under Appeal Number SCCV 180-2026.
Okay, so the Supreme Court is going to step in on April 22 and finally declare who owns the ADC.
Not quite. And this distinction is vital. The Supreme Court isn't deciding who the rightful chairman is. They are deciding if this leadership dispute is even justiciable.
Justiciable, meaning subject to court intervention.
Exactly. They're answering a fundamental question. Does the Nigerian judiciary actually have the legal jurisdiction to intervene in this specific mess? Or does Section 83.5 mean the courts are legally obligated to stay completely out of it?
Fascinating. So the Bala and Abejide faction are going into the Supreme Court arguing that Nigerian case law proves you cannot use Section 83(5) as a magical force field when you are actively breaching the party's foundational constitution.
Right.
Like you can't violate members' fundamental rights, break the core rules, and then tell the judge they aren't allowed to look.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is why major electoral analysts and heavyweight legal minds are watching this so closely. People like ADC counsel Jibrin Okutepa, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria.
It's a huge deal.
It really is. If the Supreme Court rules that courts cannot intervene, even when a faction ignores appellate status quo orders and rewrites a party structure, it sets a wild precedent. It would essentially hand a blueprint to every political opportunist in the country on how to legally hijack any party without fear of judicial oversight.
But zooming out for a second, this deep legal philosophizing isn't happening in a vacuum. I mean, the sources make it clear there is a literal ticking clock attached to this crisis.
Oh, absolutely.
And if that clock hits zero, all of these Supreme Court battles become totally pointless.
Yes. The clock is the INEC primary window. The Independent National Electoral Commission sets a highly rigid schedule for when political parties are legally permitted to conduct their primaries and nominate candidates.
And when is that?
That window opens on April 23 and closes on May 30.
Wait, April 23, that is literally 24 hours after the Supreme Court's accelerated hearing.
The timing couldn't be tighter. And because IND declined to monitor the April 14 convention due to the barrage of court orders, they currently recognize absolutely no one.
No one at all.
They don't recognize the Mark faction. They don't recognize the Bala faction. For the purposes of the upcoming 2027 electoral calendar, the ADC is completely frozen, paralyzed.
Which brings us to Abejide's very pointed warning during his press conference. He gave a 2-week ultimatum, stating that any political aspirant trying to use the ADC platform is risking their entire political future.
And he wasn't just directing that at local candidates. The reports mention massive political titans.
Right, heavyweights like Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi, Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso, and Rotimi Amaechi.
These are arguably some of the most recognizable figures in Nigerian politics. They actually attended the Mark-led convention, and the reporting suggests they are planning to use the ADC structure to file their candidacy papers.
I really need to play devil's advocate here because this is the part that seems counterintuitive to me.
Okay, go for it.
If I'm a mega figure like Peter Obi or Atiku Abubakar, right, and I have massive national backing, why on earth would I tie my 2027 presidential dreams to a sinking ship? Why not just cut my losses, leave the ADC to fight itself in court, and jump to a different, less chaotic political party before May 30?
Well, this raises an important question about the mechanics of building a mega coalition in Nigerian politics.
What do you mean?
When major opposition figures from different backgrounds want to merge forces to defeat a ruling party, they face a massive logistical hurdle. If Obi brings his people into Atiku's old party, or vice versa, massive internal wars break out over legacy leadership structures, like who gets to be the chairman, who controls the delegates.
Oh, I see. So they need a neutral space.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They need an existing, legally sound, smaller third-party vehicle like the ADC to move into. It acts as an empty but sturdy house where all the factions of a mega coalition can merge on equal footing. They rely on the ADC precisely because it already has INC registration and a national footprint.
Thanks to the work of people like Abejide.
Exactly. But now the house they want to move into is entirely consumed by fire.
Yeah.
And to make this even more complex, the sources outline a third wildcard faction throwing gasoline on it.
Wait, a third faction?
The Dumebi Kachikwu-aligned faction. While Mark and Bala are fighting in court, this third group is operating in a completely separate universe. They held their own separate National Executive Committee meeting. They convened their own caretaker committee.
Unbelievable.
Kenneth Ihiater, who was an obvious state ADC chairman that Mark supposedly expelled, is tied to this group, and they completely reject the Mark Convention.
So we literally have 3 distinct captains, Mark, Bala, and Kachikwu, each one fighting over a ship that's about to miss the tide, and each one views the other 2 as completely fraudulent.
And this leads us to a chilling concept that electoral analysts are terrified of right now. A party becoming legally unusable.
Legally unusable. What does that actually look like in practice?
Think about the tribunal mechanism that happens after every major Nigerian election. Let's say one of these factions manages to push a presidential candidate through and they run the general election.
Okay.
The moment the election is over, the opposing parties will immediately file a lawsuit at the election tribunal. They will point back to April 2026 and argue, hey, this candidate's party primary was conducted by a faction that was under a court injunction and not recognized by INA.
Oh, wow. So they go after the foundation?
Exactly. The tribunal can look at that deeply flawed foundational structure and instantly invalidate the entire ticket. Millions of votes, billions of naira in campaign spending completely erased because the primary process wasn't legally sound.
So Abejide is looking at these mega coalition giants and warning them that if they proceed without a unified Supreme Court validated leadership, they are building their 2027 campaigns on legal quicksand.
Right. And if the Supreme Court delays its ruling on April 22, or if the ruling just triggers another wave of litigation between the three factions,
That May 30 deadline will just come and go.
and the ADC will be permanently locked out of the electoral cycle.
It's a massive mess. Pulling this all together, we have unpacked an incredible amount of density from these reports today.
We really have.
We started with the explosive April 14 convention where the Mark faction purged their rivals. We looked at the furious counteroffensive from Bala and Abejide, who claim the party they built is being hijacked by, serial defectors.
Yeah.
We waded through the judicial traffic jam, the Court of Appeals freeze order, Justice Abdul Malik's freeze order, Justice Moit's indefinite pause, all of it, funneling into a massive Supreme Court showdown on April 22 over the pure justiciability of the crisis.
Right.
And then we have the Kachiku wildcard faction operating in the background, all while the INEC primary window opens just 24 hours later, threatening to render the whole party legally unusable for the opposition's mega coalition.
It is a perfect storm of political ambition and legal ambiguity.
So what does this all mean for you as the listener? Why does a single factional fight inside a third party matter so much?
Because it exposes the gears.
Exactly, because this situation is a masterclass in the actual mechanics of political power. It proves that elections aren't just won through soaring speeches or sheer popularity at the ballot box. They are won, and they are lost, by understanding the microscopic details of electoral law and party constitutions.
Yeah, the fine print.
It shows you how a single clause, like Section 83.5, can be weaponized as a shield, and how the precise timing of a court injunction can literally make or break a presidential run.
It is the unseen machinery that dictates who even gets to be on the ballot in the first place. And looking across all these sources, there's one final lingering thought that really frames the stakes.
Let's hear it.
We've talked endlessly about the courts, the politicians, and the factions, but the ultimate silent power in this entire saga might actually be INE.
How so? Like, by doing nothing?
Think about this scenario. What if the Supreme Court rules on April 22 that internal party disputes truly are strictly non-justiciable? Meaning, the highest court in the land officially washes its hands of the entire mess and says the judiciary cannot intervene.
Okay, so a total hands-off approach.
Right. If the law refuses to choose a conductor for this train, how is the dispute settled? Does ultimate authority simply default to whoever held the biggest convention and shouted the loudest? Or does unchecked absolute power quietly slide over to INEC?
Oh, man. So INEC just gets to decide.
If the courts step away, does INEC just get to arbitrarily point to one faction when that primary window opens and say, "We choose you"? It is a profound question about where ultimate authority really resides when the legal system bows out, and it is something every political analyst will be watching incredibly closely as that April 23 deadline arrives.